He'd built his empire in the margins, not in gunfire and spectacle, but in freight manifests and shell companies, and the deliberate, quiet suffocation of anyone who moved against him. Then someone set fire to his car with him still in it, and the nerve damage in both hands made it so he couldn't hold a pen anymore without the letters shaking into illegibility. Bex found out about the job the way she found out about most things lately: desperation and a bad Wi-Fi connection in a diner booth at 11 p.m. Private financial analyst. Live-in position, competitive compensation, discretion required. The posting had no company name, no address, just a phone number and the kind of vagueness that should have been a red flag the size of a barn door. She called anyway. She was 2 months behind on rent, driving a 2003 Civic that wheezed uphill and carrying a CPA license that had become about as useful as a library card in a town with no library. 8 months since Holloway and Associates had escorted her out with a cardboard box and a termination letter that didn't say whistleblower but meant it. 8 months of gig bookkeeping, freelance tax prep, and the specific humiliation of explaining to her landlord, again, that the check was coming. The check was not coming. The black SUV sent to pick her up didn't help her nerves. Neither did the man behind the wheel, who had the conversational range of a fence post and drove to an estate 40 minutes outside the city, like he was transporting evidence, not a person. The house was, Bex didn't have a better word for it, a compound. Stone walls, iron gates that closed behind the car with a sound like a vault. Security cameras on pivot mounts tracked her as she walked up the drive with her laptop bag cutting into her shoulder and a coffee stain on her blazer that she'd tried to Tide pen out of existence and failed. A man named Rutger patted her down in the foyer. He had a face like a closed fist. He took her keys and her phone and handed her a laminated badge that said visitor in block letters. Down the east wing, he said. Don't touch the filing cabinets. She found the study at the end of a hallway that smelled of cedar and old paper. She didn't knock. She was already 13 minutes late and figured her odds weren't great, regardless. The man behind the desk wasn't what she'd expected. Bex had constructed a picture on the drive over. Old, heavy, the kind of man who wore his money like body armor. What she got instead was someone who looked like he'd been built for a different century. Broad through the shoulders, jaw like something carved rather than grown, maybe early 40s, with a face that had been handsome once, and was now something harder and more permanent. A white dress shirt, collar open, sleeves rolled. His left hand rested flat on the desk. His right was in his lap, out of sight. He didn't look up. "Miss Weller," he said. His voice was level, almost bored. "You're late." 13 minutes, Beck said. "And your driver took the 9 instead of the 12. I clocked it." He added 11 minutes of unnecessary commute. "So really I'm 2 minutes early and he owes me an apology." Drexel looked up. His eyes were a pale grey that managed to be both cold and extremely awake. He studied her the way she imagined he studied everything, cataloguing, calculating, deciding. Then he slid a manila folder across the desk without a word. Inside, 6 months of operating statements for 3 separate LLCs, printed in 10-point font, dense as concrete. "Tell me what you see," he said. It was a test, obviously. She pulled the folder toward her, flipped to the second page and started reading. 3 minutes later, she looked up. "Your Port Authority accounts are running a lag of roughly 11 days between receipt and entry, which could be normal processing delay." She paused. "Except your offshore transfers clear in 48 hours, which means someone is deliberately sitting on the domestic entries to create a window. You've got approximately $340,000 in unaccounted variance over 6 months. She set the folder down. "Someone's skimming, methodically. They know your reconciliation schedule." The room was very quiet. "The last 3 analysts I hired didn't catch that," Drexel said. "The last 3 analysts were probably scared of you," Beck said. "Numbers aren't scared of anything. They just sit there being wrong until someone looks." Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth. She would learn it was never exactly warmth with him, but something closer to attention. the kind that meant he was actually listening. "You have a termination flag on your license," he said. "Holloway and Associates." I reported my senior partner for running a ghost payroll scheme. He had 15 years of favors invested in that firm, and I had 8 months. It wasn't a hard math problem for them. She met his eyes. "I'm not going to apologize for it." "I didn't ask you to." He leaned back. His right hand came up to rest on the armrest, and she caught it, the faintest tremor in his fingers before he stilled it. Deliberate, controlled. He'd had practice hiding it. "You'll have access to the secondary accounts," he said. "You'll report to me directly, no one else. You ask questions through me. You do not discuss the financials with my staff, my associates, or anyone who shows up claiming to be from a regulatory body. You sign an NDA on paper, and you do not touch the filing cabinets in the East Wing. Because of what's in them. Because I said so." Bex looked at the variance report. She looked at him. "When do I start?" She started on a Thursday. The guest suite they gave her was larger than her entire apartment and had a bathroom with heated floors, which she discovered at 6 a.m. and briefly considered crying about. She didn't. She made coffee in the kitchen, said nothing to the 2 men playing cards at the table who said nothing to her, and went back to the study to pull the rest of the accounts. The skimming was elegant. She had to give whoever was doing it that much. They understood exactly how much friction a careful thief could create without triggering a full audit. The variance never hit the same account twice in the same quarter. The entries were always technically plausible, but numbers were honest even when people weren't, and what she was reading said, "Someone in this organization has been doing this for at least 18 months, knows your workflow intimately, and is getting bolder." She built the spreadsheet in silence. She cross-referenced. She followed the thread. By Friday afternoon, she had a pattern that led to a person. She was still staring at it when she heard the sound from the room next door, a sharp exhale, then silence, then something that was almost a curse cut off before it became one. She stood. She knocked on the connecting door. Drexel. Nothing. She opened the door. He was at the side table, a glass of water in his right hand, except he wasn't. His hand had seized around it, knuckles white, the tremor running up his entire forearm with nothing left to hide it. The glass hadn't broken yet. She crossed the room in 4 steps, wrapped both hands around his, and guided the glass down onto the surface before it could. His hand was ice cold. "Nerve damage," she said, not a question. He said nothing. The muscle in his jaw was working. "The fire," she said. "That's what they don't know about." Still nothing. Drexel. She didn't move away. She stayed right there, her hands loose over his, not forcing anything, just present. "Steady, I'm going to get your medication. Tell me where it is." "Top drawer," he said finally. His voice was flat with the effort of being flat. "Left side." She found it. Small orange bottle, a muscle relaxant. She shook one out, filled a fresh glass and came back. He took it without looking at her, which she suspected was the closest he could get to gratitude right now. She pulled the chair from the side table and sat. "You've been running this organization for, what, 6 months since the fire?" 7. "And your hands have been doing that for 7 months." "My hands," he said, "are none of your business." "They are, if the tremors are why you can't verify the books yourself." She said it the way she said everything, evenly, without softening it. You need someone to read what you can no longer read quickly enough. That's why the skimming is 18 months deep. You had a gap. He looked at her then, really looked, like he was recalculating something fundamental. "You're either very perceptive," he said, "or very reckless." "I'm a forensic accountant," Beck said. "I look for what people are trying to hide. You were trying to hide your hands." The books were already screaming. She stood up. "I found your thief. I'll show you in the morning." She walked out. Behind her, she could feel his gaze like a hand between her shoulder blades, heavy and assessing. She went back to her spreadsheets. But her own hands were shaking now, adrenaline, delayed, catching up with her all at once. She pressed them flat on the desk until they stopped. His name was Cade. 38, Director of East Coast Logistics, 15 years in the organization. He had a Rolex he shouldn't have been able to afford and a beach house in the Outer Banks that had gone up 3 years ago when the skimming started. Bex laid it out on the study table Tuesday morning, 6 pages of documentation, clean and annotated and irrefutable. Drexel looked at it for a long time without speaking. "He was at my father's funeral," he said finally. Bex said nothing. That wasn't her department. An hour later, Cady was summoned. He arrived with 2 of his own men, which told her he'd suspected something, and he walked into the study with the specific energy of a man who'd decided offense was the better strategy. He looked at Bex like she was a smudge on a window. "This the new girl?" he said. "Drexel, we've got a situation at the South Pier that needs your personal." "Sit down, Cade." The tone stopped the room. Cade sat. Drexel's right hand was out of sight beneath the desk. His left was perfectly still on the surface. He looked at the 6 pages in front of him, then at Cade, with an expression that contained no discernible emotion whatsoever, which Bex was beginning to understand was his most dangerous face. 18 months, Drexel said. "Would you like to explain the variance, or should I ask Ms. Weller to walk you through it?" Cade's eyes cut to her. Something moved through them, threat calculus, quick and ugly. "She's been here a week," Cade said. "You're going to take the word of some washed-up CPA you pulled off a job board over 15 years of." "I pulled the wire transfer records," Bex said, from the corner where she'd been standing with her arms crossed. "The ones you ran through the Cayman subsidiary. The account you opened under your mother's maiden name. Bradshaw, I think." Cade stood up. "Sit," Drexel said. Same tone. Cade sat. "You've been stealing from me for a year and a half, approximately $412,000, which is petty. And you've been doing it through a subsidiary I trusted you to manage, which I find considerably less petty." He held up the documentation with his left hand, the steadier one. "My hands shake, Cade. Not my memory, not my math. Ms. Weller simply gave me back what was already mine." Cade's jaw worked. He looked at Bex with open contempt. "You have no idea what you walked into." "I walked into a room with fraudulent books," Bex said. "I've been in those before. The man who built the last set was also very confident about what I didn't know." She paused. "He's currently awaiting a federal sentencing hearing." The silence that followed was the specific silence of a man realizing he had miscalculated. Drexel glanced at her, half a second, but she caught it. Something almost like dry amusement, deeply buried, a flash of it in those pale grey eyes before it was gone. "Rutger," Drexel said toward the door. Rutger came in. Cade went out. Bex uncrossed her arms. Her heart was doing something athletic behind her sternum that she was very carefully not showing. "You could have let me handle that," Drexel said, once the door closed. "You were handling it," she said. "I just provided supporting documentation." He picked up the 6-page report, set it down. His right hand was trembling again, faintly, and this time he didn't try to hide it. "You should know," he said, "that by walking into that confrontation, you made yourself visible to people who weren't paying attention to you before." "I was already in the building," she said. "I figured I might as well be useful." The call came at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday. She heard it through the wall, Drexel's voice, low and clipped, then silence, then a quality of silence that was not silence at all. She was already moving toward her door when Rutger knocked on it. "Change of plans," he said. "We need to move." What she understood in the next 4 minutes, assembled from fragments and the controlled panic of men who were very good at not looking panicked. Cade had talked before Rutger got to him. Someone had moved on the information. 2 cars were coming up the private road, and they were not guests. Drexel was in the hall, jacket on, his phone in his left hand. He looked at her. "You need to go with Rutger too." "Where's your medication bag?" she said. "Bex. The muscle relaxants, the lidocaine patch. Where's the bag?" A beat. Bottom left cabinet. She went and got it. She came back. She handed it to him and fell into step beside Rutger like she did this every week. "You should not be here," Drexel said, as they moved through the east wing toward the car bay. "My laptop with 14 hours of forensic work is in that study," she said, "so unfortunately I'm invested." The next 40 minutes was something she would not be able to reconstruct in order afterward. There was a car. There was a road in the dark. There was the sound of other vehicles, close. Rutger drove with the complete calm of a man who'd done this many times, and Bex sat in the back with Drexel and said nothing because there was nothing useful to say. At one point the car behind them got close enough that she could see headlights filling the rear window, and without entirely deciding to, she reached over and pressed her hand against Drexel's arm. Just there. Still. Steady. He looked down at her hand. He didn't move. "You could have left," he said, very quiet. "I've been fired from the only career I had because I wouldn't look away from a bad set of books," she said. "I'm not going to start looking away now." The pursuit ended when Rutger made a turn the car behind them wasn't expecting. The safe house was above a dry cleaner's in a neighborhood that asked no questions. The three of them went upstairs. Rutger stood by the window. Drexel sat at the table. His right hand was shaking badly now. Stress response, the nervous system overloaded and broadcasting it whether he liked it or not. "Give me your hand," she said. "That's not necessary." Drexel. She said his name the same way she read ledgers, without apology, without performance. "Give me your hand." He placed it on the table. She took it in both of hers and pressed firmly. Deep pressure, no fuss. The shaking didn't stop immediately, but it eased. He stared at the water-stained ceiling. "Cade was supposed to be loyal," he said. "Not to her exactly, to the room." "People rationalize," she said. "They always have a reason why they deserve the money they're taking. It's never about you specifically. It's about what they told themselves they were owed." She kept the pressure on his hand. "That's the thing about working with numbers instead of people. Numbers don't rationalize. They just tell you what happened." "And what do the numbers say happened to you?" he asked. She thought about it honestly. "They say I made a call that cost me a career and I'd probably make it again, which is either integrity or bad judgment, and I haven't decided which." "It's both," he said. "That's what integrity usually is." She looked up. He was watching her, not with the cataloging expression from the first day, but with something quieter and more considered, like he was reading her the way she read ledgers. "Why did you really take this job?" he asked. "I told you, rent. You could have taken other jobs. You didn't." Bex looked at their hands on the table, his large, marked with faint burn scars, trembling now only slightly, hers small ink stain on the right index finger from a pen that had leaked, calloused at the edge of the palm from years of clipboards and keyboards. "The posting said discretion required," she said finally, "and I thought, whoever needs this kind of discretion for a financial position, they're either doing something terrible or something interesting. I needed it to be interesting." She paused. "I'd been staring at $9 freelance invoices for 8 months. I needed something that mattered." He was quiet for a long time. "It's going to get more complicated," he said, "now that Cade's moved." "I know. You understand what that means?" "It means your organization has more rot I haven't found yet," she said, "which means you need me." She met his eyes steadily, "and it means I'm not leaving until the books are clean. That's just who I am." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned his hand over slowly, until her hands were resting in his palm instead of over it. Not gripping, just there. "You're a liability," he said. "I'm the only person in your building who isn't afraid of you and didn't steal from you," she said. "In your organization, Drexel, that currently makes me an asset." The corner of his mouth moved. It wasn't a smile exactly. It was what a smile looks like when it's been out of practice for a long time and is trying to remember the shape. He tried to pay her off on Friday. An envelope on the study desk when she came in at 7. Thick, cash, which told her he'd thought about it. He didn't want this traced. He'd written a number on the outside in his left hand, shaky but legible. She recognized the handwriting now. She stood in front of that envelope for about 30 seconds. Then she thought about 8 months of $9 invoices. She thought about the Holloway termination letter framed as a mutual departure. She thought about the man who'd cooked those books and walked away while she stood in a parking garage, holding a cardboard box with a succulent on top of a stapler. She thought about a set of financials that were still 18% inaccurate, and a network of shell accounts that remained unverified, and a right hand that shook too badly to hold a pen, and a man who had been running an empire through the functional equivalent of a blindfold. She picked up the envelope, held it for a second. She put it back down. She went and made coffee and came back and opened the laptop and started on the Cayman subsidiary records, and when Drexel came into the study 40 minutes later and found her exactly where she'd been every morning, he stopped in the doorway. He looked at the envelope, still on the desk, untouched. "That was a considerable amount of money," he said. "Your East Coast shell structure has a reporting gap that's going to cause you a significant problem in about 6 weeks," she said without looking up. "Unless someone fixes it, I'm the someone." She scrolled to the next page. "You can pay me my salary." He said nothing for a moment. She heard him move to the desk. She heard the envelope go into the drawer. "The Cayman accounts," he said, pulling out his own chair. "Start with the November entries." "Already there," she said. He sat down across from her. His right hand rested on the desk, trembling faintly, unhidden. She didn't look at it. They worked until noon without talking, and it was the most comfortable she'd felt in 8 months. The specific comfort of a problem that could be solved if you were willing to look at it honestly, and a person across the table who already knew what it cost to look away. The cleanup took 3 more weeks. 2 more names came up. Smaller skimmers, opportunists who'd followed K-Dade's trail because it looked safe. She documented everything. She handed it to Drexel in the same clean, annotated format each time. He handled it the way he handled everything, quietly, completely, without drama. On the last day, when she closed the final account file, and the numbers finally balanced, really balanced, every entry accounted for, every variance explained, she sat back in her chair and let out a breath that had been held for 3 weeks. "It's clean," she said. Drexel looked up from the other side of the desk. "All of it. All of it." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "What are you going to do now?" It wasn't the question she'd expected. "Go home," she said. "Sleep for approximately 48 hours. Figure out what comes next." "I have a proposal," he said. She looked at him. He'd stopped hiding his right hand completely sometime in the 2nd week. She'd noticed but hadn't said anything. He had it on the desk now, fingers spread slightly, the faint tremor visible, and apparently no longer a secret he needed her to pretend not to see. "I need a permanent financial director," he said. "Someone with full access. Someone who reports to no one but me, and who is, ideally, constitutionally incapable of being bought." A pause. "I find your track record on that point compelling." "You want to hire me," she said, officially. "I want to offer you a partnership," he said. "Different structure. Equity stake in the legitimate holdings. Authority over all financial decisions. And that corner-of-the-mouth movement, a salary that does not require you to drive a car that apparently dies at intersections." Bex looked at the closed laptop. She looked at the balanced spreadsheet on the screen behind him. She looked at his right hand on the desk, trembling slightly, unhidden. "You'd be giving me a lot of power," she said. "You already have it," he said. "I'm simply making it official and mutual." She thought about Holloway. She thought about the cardboard box and the parking garage and 8 months of $9 invoices and a lease 2 months behind, and the particular, grinding loneliness of being a person who'd done the right thing and found out the world didn't care. She thought about a man who had been running an empire through a blindfold and had let her take it off. "I have conditions," she said. "I expect nothing less. The legitimate holdings come first. You tell me where you want to go, and I'll build you a path to get there without the other work. It'll take time, maybe 3 years, but it's possible. He studied her. You've already run the numbers. I ran them in week 2, she said, when I got bored waiting for the Cayman files to load. Something happened to his face then, a slow, full arrival of something that had been building for weeks, patient and quiet and entirely real. He smiled. Not the corner of the mouth approximation, but an actual smile, the kind that reached the pale grey eyes and made him look startlingly, almost dangerously human. 3 years, he said. Give or take, she said. I'll build you a timeline. He extended his left hand across the desk, the steady one, the one he used for things that mattered. She looked at it for a moment. Then she reached out and shook it. 2 people who'd spent years being defined by what they'd lost, deciding together what they were going to build instead. Outside, the afternoon light was doing something generous with the compound's stone walls, turning the grey to something almost gold, and Bex thought, this is what it looks like when the books finally balance. Not clean in the way she'd once imagined clean could be. Not simple, but honest all the way down to the last entry. That was enough. That, she had learned the hard way, was everything.